Estamos en lo que
We
se
are
llama
in
la
what is
cueva
called
de Eremos.
the cave of Eremos.
Algunas veces vamos a escuchar en el evangelio
Sometimes
que
we
dice
hear
que
in
el
the
Señor
gospel
se fue
that
a
it says
orar
that the Lord went to
toda la
pray
noche
all
al
night
lugar de Eremos.
at the place of Eremos.
Generalmente
And
se usa la
generally,
palabra
they use
desierto, pero aquí
the
no hay
word
desierto.
desert, but here
A la
there is
hora
no
de
desert.
Galilea no
Next
hay
to
desierto.
the Sea of Galilee,
¿Qué
there
es
is
lo
no
que
desert.
significaba? Un
What did
lugar
that mean?
solitario.
A solitary place.
Por lo tanto, esta cueva
So
donde
this
nosotros estamos,
this
Jesús
cave where we
pasó
are,
muchas
where
noches
is
en
where
oración
Jesus
aquí mismo.
spent many nights in
Hay
prayer, right
una
here.
noche muy importante que
They
el Señor
were
ora aquí.
There was a night that's
Y
very
es
important where Jesus
antes de
prayed
elegir
here, and it is
a sus
before
primeros
choosing his
apóstoles,
first
sus primeros
apostles,
discípulos.
his first
El Señor
disciples.
pasa toda la
The
noche.
Lord spent the whole
Vean,
night.
vean que el mismo Señor
See that the same
ora
Lord
toda la
prayed
noche
all
para hacer
night
elecciones
to make
fundamentales
fundamental
en el reino,
decisions
para
for
la
the
vida
kingdom,
futura de la
for
iglesia.
the future life of the church.
Esto lo podemos tal vez
This
recordar
we
en San Juan
could
Pablo II,
maybe
que
recall
después de su
about
muerte nos
St. John
dimos
Paul
cuenta
II,
que
but
antes
sometimes we don't
de
realize
consagrar
that
obispos,
before consecrating bishops,
él pasaba
he
tres
spent
días de ayunos,
3
la noche
days
de
of
vigilia
fasting,
y la noche
3 nights
anterior
of
hacía
vigil,
mucha penitencia
and the night before
antes de
doing much
consagrar
penance
obispos.
before consecrating
Aquí el
bishops.
Señor oró
Here the
muchísimas
Lord
veces y
prayed
oró
so many
solo.
times, and he
Así
prayed
que
alone.
no podemos
So
captar dónde estamos,
we
¿verdad?
can
Porque lo vemos en una
understand where we
cuevita, pero aquí
are.
Jesús solo, sin los
Here,
discípulos,
Jesus by
antes de
himself,
empezar a elegir a los discípulos, está
before
aquí
choosing the
solo.
disciples, he was here alone.
¿Qué sucede aquí?
What happens here?
Está toda la noche,
He is here all
toda
night,
la noche orando
the whole
al
night
Padre
praying to the
para
Father
elegir a los
to
primeros
choose the
discípulos.
first disciples,
O sea, para discernir
to
de todos los hombres que
discern
viven aquí,
which will be
de todos
among
los
the men
pescadores que
who
aquí
live
pescan,
here, the fishermen who
quiénes son
fish
los
here,
primeros.
who will be the first
Es una
ones.
decisión
It's a
fundamental
fundamental
porque
decision
los primeros
because the first
son
ones
los que abren el
are
camino y
those who
los que
open the
vienen
path for
después.
those who will come after.
Pero para el Señor,
But for the
esa
Lord,
lección es tan
this
importante
lesson is so
que Él pasa en
important
vigilia
that he
toda la
spends
noche en
the
esta
whole
cueva.
night in vigil in this
Se
cave.
preguntarán por qué
And
aquí,
we may ask ourselves why
con
here,
tantas cuevas que hay.
with so many
Bueno,
caves
tiene
that there
mucho que
are.
ver con lo que hay abajo.
It has much to do with what is
¿Se
below.
acuerdan que en la mañana les
In the morning, we
decía
could see that
que
we
todo
heard
esto es
that
la
this whole
sección de
section
Tabca,
is Tabka.
que quiere
And
decir,
so, just like there is the section of
como hay la sección
Capernaum,
de Cafarnaúm, la sección
this
de
is the
Jerusalén,
section of
esta es la
Tabka.
sección de
And in
Tabca.
Tabka, there's
En
3
Tabca hay tres
rocks,
piedras,
the
¿verdad? La
place
multiplicación
where
de los
he
panes,
multiplied
la piedra donde
the
se sienta el
breads, the
Señor,
place
que es
where
en
the
realidad,
Lord, which
esto
in
es parte del
reality,
monte de las
this is
bienaventuranzas, pero
part
es la
of
parte
the
que
Mount
da
of the
hacia abajo.
Beatitudes, but it's closer to
Aquí,
the
más
Sea
para
of
atrás,
Galilee.
está
And
la
so a little
piedra
bit
donde el
further
Señor
up
proclama
is
el sermón
the
de la
rock
montaña.
where the Lord proclaimed the Sermon on the
Y
Mount.
luego está
And
la
then
piedra
there
donde
is
él
the rock where
cocina,
he
porque
cooks
la primacía de
at the
Pedro
primacy
está
of Peter
aquí.
over there. And
Tabca
Tabka is
la
there,
primacía
the
está aquí
primacy
y
is
aquí
here,
estamos
and
nosotros en el
we
monte
are
del
here
sermón de la
on
montaña, pero
the
la
mountain
piedra
of the
del
Sermon
sermón
on the
está
Mount.
para allá. Quiere decir que
And
el
so
Señor
the Lord, he
vino de
came from
allá,
there,
subió
he
por
came
aquí
up here
para ir a hablar el
to
sermón de la
be able
montaña
to
y
speak the
enseñar
Sermon
el
on the
sermón.
Mount.
¿Qué
What
sucede? Que les
happened?
expliqué
And
que
I'll
aquí,
explain to you that
exactamente,
here is
más o
exactly more or
menos
less
detrás de donde está
behind
Norma,
where Norma is.
existían
There
7
were
cataratas,
7
pequeños
waterfalls,
chorros,
7 small
pero con una
streams,
fuerza del
but
agua
with
que se le llamaban como
a
cataratas.
force of the water that they
Y por
called them
eso
waterfalls.
todos los pescadores de
And
toda la
all
región
the fishermen from the
venían
whole
ahí a
region
lavar
came there
las
to
redes,
wash
porque
their
para lavar
nets,
las redes
because to wash the nets,
necesita
they
fuerza
need
de
much
agua.
force,
Por lo
they need
tanto,
strong
en
water.
esa época no
And
había
in that
grifos,
time, there
¿verdad?
were
La
not
fuerza del
faucets.
agua
They
viene de
had to
las
have the
cataratas.
force of the water that
Entonces
came from the
venían aquí
waterfalls.
abajo
And so he
a
came,
lavar sus redes.
they would come here right
¿Y qué
below us to
pasa?
wash their
Traten de
nets. And what
imaginarse, a mí
happened?
me conmueve.
Try to
Entonces,
imagine it. It really moves me.
el Señor está aquí
The Lord is
todas las
here
noches
the whole
orando,
night praying,
pidiéndole al Padre
asking the Father
que le dé la
that he
luz
would
para
give him the
saber
light to know
cuáles son esos primeros
who will be those first ones,
discípulos.
the first disciples.
Y está en la mañana,
And he's
muy
there in the
temprano en la
morning,
mañana,
very
porque
early
los
in the morning,
pescadores
because
salían muy
the
temprano en
fishermen
la
went out
mañana.
very early in the morning.
Y está muy temprano en la
And
mañana
he's there very early in the
aquí.
morning praying
Cuando
here.
oye a
When
estos
he
hombres,
hears these
pescadores,
men, fishermen,
por fin, gritando.
yelling,
¿Cómo vas a ir? ¿Cómo
how
vas
are you
a
gonna
comer?
go?
¿Cuántos
How
pescados?
how many fish did you get yesterday? Was it good? Was it bad? How did it go with you? The shouts of the fishermen.
Que gritaban ahí en ese momento.
And who were those who were yelling there in that moment?
Habían dos barcas
There were two boats
que se están hablando y pescas
who
que
were
no han pescado nada.
speaking,
Y
how was your
que uno
fish?
pescó de
I didn't get
cuatro. ¿Y a ti
anything.
cómo te fue?
How did it
Bien,
go
y
for
el Señor
you?
está aquí viendo
And so
a
he's
la
here
humanidad
seeing
en sus
seeing
realidades.
humanity in
¿Quiénes
their
son esos
realities.
hombres que él está viendo
Who are those
desde
men which
aquí?
he's seeing from here?
Pedro,
Peter,
Andrés,
Andrew,
Santiago y
James,
Juan.
and John.
Los cuatro
The
primeros
four
discípulos.
first disciples.
Pero ¿qué hora el Señor aquí?
And what time is the Lord here?
Una vez yo estaba aquí
One time
sola,
I was here alone,
le decía, Señor, ¿qué
and I told
orabas?
him, Lord, what did
¿Qué
you
orabas en
pray
esa noche
in that
para
night
discernir
to
quiénes
discern
van a ser? O sea,
who
¿qué
we're
te
going to be?
pasaba por el
I mean,
corazón?
what went
Yo
through your
estaba por
heart?
así como que
And I
quería
was here
estar
like
sentada al lado del Señor para
sitting
saber qué
as
qué
if I was next to
pensaba
the
él
Lord,
esa
asking
noche.
him, what did you think
Una de
that
las
night?
decisiones más importantes
He went through one of the most important
para la
decisions
extensión de su
for
reino, para su
the
misión
extension
pública.
of
¿Qué estaba
his
pensando?
kingdom,
¿Qué
of his
oraba? ¿Qué le
public
pasaba por el
ministry. What did
corazón?
he pray? What went through
Y
his
en
heart?
ese momento
And
yo
in
estaba
that
en
moment,
silencio
I was in
total y empecé
silence.
a oír
I was in
la
total
voz de
silence,
un
and I
hombre
began to hear
que
the
me
voice of a
rezaba
man
interiormente
who
el Salmo
interiorly
8.
prayed with me Psalm
El
8.
Salmo 8,
And Psalm 8,
ahí es donde empieza.
here we
El
start,
Salmo 8
is a psalm
es,
which is,
empieza diciendo,
it begins by saying, Lord,
¿qué es el hombre?
what is man
Para que te acuerdes de él.
that you think of him?
¿Qué es el ser humano
What
para
is
darle tanto
man
poder?
that you give him so
Lo
much
hiciste
power?
un poco inferior que los ángeles.
You made him little less than the
Lo
angels.
coronaste de gloria
You
y
crowned him
dignidad.
with glory and
Y me doy
dignity.
cuenta que el
And
Señor
I realized
estaba
that the Lord
viendo
was
estos cuatro
seeing
hombres
those four men
agarrados de la cintura con su
grabbing
con
their
su
cinctures
cinturón,
with
lavando, preparándose,
washing,
hablando,
preparing
gritando, y el Señor
themselves,
está viendo
speaking,
estos
yelling, and the
hombres y
Lord was
está
seeing
diciéndole
those
al
men
Padre,
and saying to
¿qué
the
es el
Father, what is man
para que te acuerdes de él?
that
¿Qué
you
es
keep him in
el
mind?
hombre
What
para que
is
me hayas
man
pedido
that you have
encarnar
asked me
y
to
venir a
to
salvarlo? Y
incarnate
la
myself and to
iglesia va a
come to
ser
save them? What is and for the church to be
sostenida.
sustained,
La verdad va a ser
for the
comunicada. Mi
truth to
cuerpo
be
y mi sangre va a ser
communicated,
dado,
for
donado.
my body and blood
Por
to
eso
be given for
José
men.
dice, lo hiciste un poco inferior a
And
los
that's why he
hombres,
said,
pero
you
los
made him little
coronaste de
less than
gloria
a
y
God,
dignidad.
but
Entonces
you
hay
crowned
que
him with glory and
pensar
dignity.
que el Señor está
And so you have to
viendo,
think that the Lord
esto yo
is
lo vi,
watching.
que
It's
está
because
viendo
I
estos
see it. The
cuatro
Lord is
hombres
watching
y él
these four
está
men, and He's
rezando el Salmo
praying
8
Psalm 8
porque de verdad que el
because
Salmo 8 es
truly
como
Psalm 8
cuánto ama
is
el Padre al hombre,
about how
que
much the
hizo que
Father
su
loves
único
men,
hijo se hiciera hombre.
and
Y
so much that
está
He would make His
viendo
Son a
quiénes
man,
son los
and He's
primeros hombres
seeing those
que
first
lo van a
men
seguir y
who
que
are
van a
going to
ser los
follow Him
primeros
and who are going to be the
que van a
first ones
empezar
who are
a
going to
formar
begin
su
to
familia,
form
que
His
es la
family,
iglesia.
which is the church.
Pero ellos no saben que
But they don't know that He's
ellos
here.
están en su mundo, ellos
They're in
están
their
en su
own
mundo de
world.
pescadores.
They're in their world of
Pero
fishermen.
Jesús está aquí
But Jesus is
recordando
here,
un salmo y
remembering a
entendiendo
psalm
quiénes
and
son ellos,
understanding who they
entendiendo
are, understanding
quién es el hombre. A
what,
pesar de
who is man.
nuestra debilidad y flaqueza, somos
Among
nosotros
our
llamados y el Señor
weaknesses,
quiere hacer su obra
the
aquí en
Lord wants to
nosotros.
do His work in
El
us.
Señor quiere
The Lord
elegirnos,
wants to
quiere
choose us.
utilizarnos
The Lord
para
wants to
extender su reino.
use them to
Y
extend His
Jesús, no
kingdom.
sabemos si lloró de
And so
emoción.
I don't know if
No
He
sabemos las
cried
veces que
from
habrá llorado
emotion,
aquí por muchas
but
cosas.
Jesus must have cried here for many
¿Cuántas
things.
veces habrá
How many
estado aquí
times would
solo
He have been
pensando?
here alone praying?
Aquí les voy a decir algo.
Here I'm going to tell you
Pensando
something.
en que
Thinking
va a fundar su familia,
and how
que
He's
es
going
la
to found His
iglesia.
family, which is the church.
Por eso es que es importante
And
el
that's
título
why
que
it's
casi no se le da
important,
a
the
la
title
iglesia,
that
es
we
uno de los
almost
títulos
never
más
give to the church,
importantes.
but it's one of the most
La
important ones.
familia
The
de Jesús.
family of Jesus.
Hablamos de la Sagrada
We speak of
Familia,
the Holy
de la
Family,
Virgen, de
of
San
Our
José,
Lady, of Saint
y de nuestro
Joseph,
Señor.
and of our
Es
Lord.
verdad que Jesús
And it's true
nace en
that
el seno
Jesus
de una
was born
familia,
in the womb of a
crece en el
family.
seno de una
He
familia y con eso
grew up in a
establece
family,
el
and that's
evangelio
why
de la
He
familia.
establishes in
Pero cuando él va
a
a
gospel of the
empezar su
family.
vida pública,
And when
¿qué
He's going to
empieza?
begin His public
Él
life,
fundó la
how does He
iglesia.
begin it?
No, es mala,
They
no
don't.
es una palabra
To say that He founded the
adecuada
church
para
is
hablar
not
de
an
la
adequate
iglesia.
word to
Jesús
speak of the church,
dio a
brothers and
luz
sisters. Jesus gave birth to the church through his pierced heart. What he did here was to give life to the church as a fruit of all of his salvific work. And this church was born in the moment of the cross, the culmination of his 3 years that he spent doing the good in his public life, with all it brings with it, the teachings, the gestures, the miracles. All that he did is the birth of the church. But the church has to have a structure. The church must have apostles. The church must have teachers. The church must have women who donate their lives, like Mary Magdalene did, and the other women, like the ones at the pillar, which we don't know of all the women who followed him, but when Jesus sees them, he understands that with them, he is going to begin his family. And I'm here saying, why did the Lord begin his family from here? Geographically, we know that he came here. They came here to wash their nets because the stream was here, which means two things. The sacraments, which he gave in the fullness of time, and another thing, the water which flows from there is pure water. So one can wash in it. It has a meaning. Pure water means that the apostles corresponded to the mission of preserving the purity of the faith, which they were going to hear, see, and receive. That was the mission of the apostles and the successors of the apostles, beginning with Peter, the successor of Peter and the successor of the apostles. Their mission is to preserve the purity of the faith. Why are they with a net? Because like I told you, it's one of the parables that the Lord gives, that here in this zone was the parable of the church. The kingdom of heaven is like a net that you throw and you catch all the fish, which are nations. The Lord, why here? He chooses to begin to form those who are going to be the ones who sustain the faith of the church, with those who are going to begin the life of the church. And he was here, and I know that the Lord doesn't do anything by chance. Everything has a meaning, not only theologically, mystically, humanly, but there's also a meaning that is historical for the Lord. And I say, what is it here in the cave that the Lord just wanted to begin his family? And I was praying when one of the priests, the Franciscan priests, came, who gives classes in the Biblicum in Jerusalem. And he presents himself to me, and I said, Father, I want to ask you a question. Why does Jesus begin from here to gather those who were going to begin his family? And he tells me, well, truly I've never thought about it. And the Lord, he does everything with a reason of love. And so from here there is a purpose of love, a very great one. And so he stood there, and I asked Father, where's Nazareth geographically? And he said, over there. And he tells me, in that time, well, now it's a giant city, no? But in that time, he says that he could have seen some buildings up from Nazareth. And in that, I tell you, truly, I began to cry. Because here the Lord is going to choose Peter. The first one who chose was Peter. The one who was going to be the Pope, the father of his new family. And he's going to choose the father of the new family, and he has to look at Nazareth to remind himself and to make memory of the father of the Holy Family. And that's why I teach very much to the bishops that the ministry, the Petrine ministry and the apostolic ministry have to first found themselves in the Josephite principle, that they are the culmination of the life of Saint Joseph to build the church, and that's why Saint Joseph is the custodian of the church. And what is the mission of Peter? To take care of the sheep, to protect them, to nourish them, the same thing that Saint Joseph did with Our Lady, who is the prototype of the church. So the church in person is Our Lady. And that's why I tell the seminarians and the priests that they have to have in their rooms an image of Our Lady before their beds, so that they see the image of the church. The church as a bride in Our Lady, because Our Lady is the face, the living face of the church. In reality, she is the church made person. And so the Lord, in this place, is remembering Saint Joseph, thinking about how his father was and how he's going to go down to choose the father of his new family. It's very moving because it's not moving just because of the words. It's moving to think that Jesus is thinking, that Jesus is feeling, that he goes down, and we already know the event that happens here. He goes down to that place where they are, and the first one that he encounters is Peter. The first one that he says, "Come and follow me, leave everything behind, leave your nets, leave your life, leave the boat, leave everything, and follow me." It is to Peter, and then he says it to the brother of Peter. And then the other boat comes and he asks John, and then John's brother, James, the famous James. And so here, down below, is where the choosing of the apostles begins, where the Lord has been here praying all night about who is going to initiate not only the apostles, the first sons of the church are going to begin to be giving shape to the church so that they can give it life. Life that confirms itself publicly in Pentecost. We're not going to go up because it's a little bit more dangerous, but about 10 minutes a little bit further up, there is the place. Remember, the Lord here said it. After the Lord, 2 years later, he goes up here a little bit further up. Just him. Even there's an altar there now, where the Lord says, "Go out to the whole world and proclaim the gospel." There are 2 times in which the Lord gives what the church calls the missionary mandate. The missionary mandate the Lord gives here in Galilee, and the Lord gives it in Jerusalem before ascending to heaven. And you're going to hear them both, the different versions. Here he tells them, "Go to the whole world and preach the gospel." We're going to hear it in the section what he adds in that mandate. And in this mountain, he says the Sermon on the Mount, the Sermon of the Beatitudes. And here the Lord prayed many nights. Those nights, this night was the night of the election, but we don't know how many nights he spent here, where he came to pray with his Father to make important decisions, to know when it was the hour to do something, when it was the time to do an exorcism, when it was the time to preach something. Don't believe that the Lord went and preached just because something occurred to him. He prayed about what he needed to say to the people, to the multitudes which were waiting for him. And something great is that the Lord, it's like, close your eyes and imagine those fishermen, right? Us, I don't know many fishermen that have that as their profession, but you know what? Like St. Peter said, none of us are studied and learned people, the best people. The only one who had a little bit more of studies was Matthew. But we're going to see why Matthew had more studies. But the Lord is going to begin the church with fishermen. Why? Because the fisherman has the understanding of fishing. He knows where the fish are, where to throw the nets. The Lord doesn't annihilate the gifts, but He elevates them for His kingdom. And He needed, and that's why there is a moment with the miraculous catch where Peter comes. Poor Peter, who fought so much to catch fish, and he passed through so many difficulties just to catch fish. And that's why Peter had so much problems with Matthew, because he had to pay really high taxes because it costed him to sell fish. But the Lord, when He does the miraculous catch, can you imagine Peter? He says it. This is the catch of a lifetime. And the Lord tells him, leave it. Leave it there on the coast. And He has a very important lesson for Peter. Don't tie yourself to the fruits. Your mission is to throw the nets. Your mission is to throw the Word of God. Your mission is to throw the seed of faith, but don't attach yourself to the fruits. Leave the fruits for me. This is very important, brothers and sisters, because it is the most common thing is to attach ourselves to the fruits. And that's why we see persons who have 50 years of being the sacristan, and nobody can enter into the sacristy. The sacristy of God, and it's from the church. It's like if the Lord allows me to serve, but there's space for others, right? We cannot go attaching ourselves to the fruits, and the Lord doesn't want that we are attached to anything but Him and His holy will. And so here He goes down, He directs Himself to them, He chooses them, and we see the miraculous catch, which is in the primacy. The Lord tells them, you are not going to stop being fishermen. And that's why I've chosen fishermen, because you're not going to stop being fishermen. But now you're not going to fish for fish. You're going to be fishers of men. But the talent of the fishermen was necessary for the mission of knowing where and how are the waters, how is the environment, how are the fish, where is their nourishment for the fish. The Lord uses the talents because they're going to be pastors. And so He wanted that the shepherds see what they needed to introduce the fish into the net. So I tell you, this little cave where we are, here there is not even candles or anything, but here the Lord spent nights in prayer. And we have the privilege to be here. To be here, and all that the Lord had thought, all that the Lord had spoken with His Father, all that He had heard being here, and that's why we're going to be for a short minute in silence with Jesus. That which you have heard in your heart, keep it. Because I think that here one of the things that we should discover of the heart of the Lord, one of the things that here we must allow the Lord to reveal to us is the loneliness of His heart. It doesn't matter how surrounded by people the Lord
No
was.
importa cuánto
It didn't matter
habla,
how much
cuánto
he spoke, how
los
much
evangelios dicen su
the
fama
gospel says
se
in that his
esparcía. Su
fame
fama quiere
spread.
decir el conocimiento
His
de él se
fame means to
esparcía.
say that
Cuánta
the
gente
knowledge
lo
of him
buscaba,
spread. How
cuánta
many people
gente
searched for him, how many
venía a
people
él
came to him,
siempre con los
always
apóstoles.
with the apostles.
El Señor en
The
realidad
Lord in reality,
estaba
interiorly,
siempre solo.
was always alone.
Siempre aquel que
Always,
está llamado
he was the one who was called to donate himself, and this call
a ser pastor de un
to
rebaño.
be the pastor of a sheepfold.
Siempre aquel que está llamado a llevar sobre sus hombros.
He always had to carry this call upon his own shoulders, the call of God
Para el bien de muchos,
for the good of many.
tendrá muchos alrededor,
He would have many around
pero
him,
su corazón
but his
vive
heart
una profunda
lived
soledad,
a profound
porque nadie
loneliness
comparte
because nobody
su misión
shared
ni
his
su
mission
cruz.
or his cross.
Y por eso
And
el
that's why
Señor
the Lord
venía a
came
estar
to
a
be
solas,
alone,
a estar en oración
to
con
be
su
in prayer
Padre,
with his Father,
pero en realidad,
but in reality,
físicamente,
physically,
manifestaba la verdad
he
de su
manifested the
corazón.
truth of his heart.
Su corazón
His heart
experimentó siempre
experienced
una profunda
always a
soledad.
profound
La única
loneliness,
que
the
consolaba
only one who could
la soledad
console
de Jesús,
the
era su
loneliness
madre.
of Jesus was his mother.
El único que
The
lo
only
consoló
one who consoled him
en la soledad
in
era su
loneliness
padre virginal San José.
was
Pero aún
his
así,
virginal father, Saint Joseph. But
había
even then,
una
there was a
soledad mucho más
a
profunda,
loneliness much deeper,
porque incluso el haber
because
abandonado
it
la
included
gloria
having
para
been
hacerse
having
uno de nosotros
abandoned his
requirió
glory to become one of
que
us. It
él se
required that he
desprendiera,
disposed himself,
no que perdiera, se
not that he
desprendiera
lost, but he
de
disposed
toda la majestad,
himself
de
of all of his
toda su
majesty, of all of his
grandeza
greatness,
divina,
his divine greatness,
para no manifestarse
so
así,
that he
sino
wouldn't manifest
manifestarse
himself like that,
pequeño.
but rather small.
La verdad que la
The truth
encarnación
is
es
that
un
the
misterio,
incarnation
hermano.
is a mystery, brothers and
Y yo
sisters,
creo
and
que
I think that
aquí estamos
here
recibiendo
we are
mucho, pero la
receiving
vamos a
very
estar
much, but we're going to
desenvolviendo
be
cuando regresemos.
developing it, unraveling it when
Cuando
we go back.
estemos en misa y
And
oigamos que
when
el
we were in
Señor
Mass,
hizo
I
esto
heard
y
that the
aquello,
Lord
vamos
did
a
this
saber lo
and
que
that. We're going to know
significa,
what it
vamos a
means. We're
sentirlo
going
más
to feel
profundamente,
it more
pero no nos
deeply, but we're
olvidemos
not
que el
going to,
Señor
we must not forget that the
siempre,
Lord always
experimentó la
experienced
soledad
the loneliness
grita,
which cries out.
el único momento que la grita
And the only
es en la
moment
cruz.
that he cries out is on the
Padre,
cross.
Padre, ¿por qué me
Father,
has
Father,
abandonado?
why have you
¿Lo
abandoned
había
me?
abandonado el Padre?
Did the Father
No.
abandon him? No.
Estaba exclamando
He
la
was
soledad
exclaiming the
que
loneliness
sintió
which he
al
felt
hacerse hombre
making himself
y
man.
bajar del cielo,
And from coming down from
y por ser
heaven
hombre,
and from being
tenía que
man,
estar,
he had to be,
no lo puedo explicar
I can't
muy
explain
bien,
it
pero
very
tenía
well,
que
but
estar,
he had to be
experimentar la lejanía
experiencing
que
the
el hombre,
distance that
todos
man,
nosotros,
all of
tenemos de
us,
Dios.
have with God.
La tenía que
He had
experimentar
to have
y esa es la que él
experienced,
grita.
and
Porque en
that's
ese
why he
grito de
shouts
Padre,
it.
¿por qué me has abandonado?
Father, why have you abandoned
Gritó
me?
por
He
toda la
cried
humanidad.
out for all of
¿Por qué
humanity.
me
Why?
has
Why have
abandonado?
you
En
abandoned me?
realidad era el
In
grito
reality, it's a cry
del alma
from
de
the
la
soul of humanity
humanidad. Porque hemos
because we
perdido
have
comunión
lost our
con el
communion with the
Padre.
Father. And so now
Así
we
que
can
ahora
go
podemos
down
bajar antes que
before it gets
oscurezca,
dark.
pero
But
sepamos
we
de
know
dónde
from where
el
the
Señor
Lord
ora para
prayed to
escoger a
choose
sus
his
primeros
first disciples.
discípulos.